Welcome to Deathly Honest, the podcast where we get real about the parts of life we often avoid, aging, death, and grief. Here, we strip away the cliches, drop the euphemisms, and dive into the truths most people keep at arm's length. This isn't just a place for somber reflections. It's a raw, profound, and sometimes darkly humorous exploration of the journey we all face. Whether it's tackling the messy emotions that come with loss, confronting the fears around mortality, or finding a laugh in life's most challenging transitions, Deathly Honest is here to make these conversations easier, one episode at a time. So grab your favorite beverage, a box of tissues, and your most beloved comfort item, and let's get deathly honest together. Hi everyone, it's Kelli here. Welcome to Deathly Honest. Today, I'm going to build on the last episode. If you hadn't listened to the last episode, it's just sort of a shorter episode about topics that I want to cover here at the podcast, topics I cover in my office with people, and building on this idea that grief isn't just about dying or people that have died or animals that have died, or even I think a lot of people know that grief, we can have grief over relationships, we can have grief when we move, but I do grief for a living, and I think that grief is involved in just about everything we do in our lives. And so one of the things I want to talk about, I'm going to build on a lot of the stuff from the last episode, but I'm going to do them individually. And this podcast episode, I want to focus on something that might not seem as though it is grief related, and yet there's an enormous grief component to it. So years ago, I, in my office, started having women presenting to me who had narcissistic mothers. And it became a thing. And it was almost as though I was suddenly a magnet to this. And I didn't know a lot about narcissism at the time, quite honestly. I knew what a narcissist was, but I hadn't done a lot of research into narcissism. And so I started doing that because I was having women coming in and we would talk and get to know each other. And over time, there was a similar theme. And it would tie back in to their childhood, which all of our stories tie back into our childhood. But these were unique and uniquely similar, which was the part that was fascinating to me. And so I started doing some research into narcissism in general, and then deeper into narcissistic mothers and then daughters of narcissistic mothers. And I did not know that there were books written about daughters of narcissistic mothers, and that it was a very unique and also very similar to each person sort of situation. So the thing that really got me when I started digging into narcissism was one of the very first things I read, and that was that narcissistic abuse is the worst kind of abuse because the abuser doesn't know they're doing it. And man, that stuck with me. I know narcissists. I have narcissists in my life. But boy, when you have a situation where there really is narcissistic abuse, it is very, for lack of a better word, very intense. Because if this is your mother and she is a narcissist and abusive, she doesn't know she's being abusive. So if you have someone in your life who hits you They can excuse it and deny it and all those kind of things, but they know they hit you. And there's usually a mark, right, that proves there was some physical abuse. Even emotional abuse, people can deny it, but most people, I'll never say all to everything, to anything, but most people understand that maybe they said something inappropriate, or, or they'll use an excuse like, well, you made me say that, or whatever. But they know that they've said something. Most people. But with narcissistic abuse, the narcissist truly does not know what they're doing. They don't know that they're doing anything harmful, and you can't convince them that they are. So in most other situations, you can have somebody and sit with them, and maybe you have an argument, or maybe it's just a long conversation, and you go back and forth, and you will say, you said this thing to me and it was very hurtful, and maybe they'll be defensive for a little bit until we can get to a situation where two people can really listen to each other and go, okay, maybe I said this in a way I didn't want to say it. I understand that it hurt you, and I will try to change the way we interact in the future in these situations, or, anything. I'm just going off the top of my head of how you can have a conversation with most people, not everybody, but most people, even if we don't want to admit, right, that we're like, okay, what I said was kind of crummy and I maybe shouldn't have said that. At some point, most people will take responsibility, or at least, again, if nothing else, maybe they'll make excuses. They'll go, yes, I said that, but you caused me to say that. And that's a whole different story. But when it comes to narcissism, narcissists absolutely deny ever doing anything harmful. And there is no conversation that you can have that has them take responsibility. And if that's your mother, this is very, very complicated. So, and then when it comes to daughters of narcissistic mothers, I think there's uniqueness in any kind of narcissistic parent, right? So if you have a narcissistic father, there's unique things that come from that. If you are the son of a narcissistic mother, there are unique things that come from that. My specialty has really become daughters of narcissistic mothers. And there are some unique things that happen being raised by a narcissistic mother. And my experience has been sort of fascinating because many of my clients that come in have a sister, not all of them, but a lot of them have one sister. And one of the sisters becomes very focused on protecting the mother, while the other sister at some point is the one that goes, I can't do this anymore. And obviously, I'm seeing that sister because she's starting to go, I don't understand what's happening here. This isn't working for my life anymore. And usually the way it starts, though, is when this daughter has her own children. I think if she does not have children, a daughter of a narcissistic mother can tolerate her mother for a very long time. But when children come into the mix, and now the narcissistic mother is a grandmother who thinks she has say or control over these grandchildren, this becomes a problem. And you see it play out by narcissistic mothers trying to manipulate these children and often turning them against their mothers. So the narcissistic mother's daughter, um, if she can get her grandchildren to side with her, then she really can do damage to her daughter. So this is where I see this sort of play out, and it tends to play out very slowly, where someone will come into the office and they'll start to talk about some of their own personal traits, right? And I always get family histories. And nobody says to me, oh, and my mother's a narcissist. I get to know, they kind of give me examples of things that maybe have happened to them in their childhood. You can see, here's the other thing. I'm going to back up for a second. That I think we all have some narcissism. We have to. We are all out for our own survival at the core of our beings. But narcissism is a spectrum. And there are people who have narcissistic tendencies, and then there are full-on narcissists. And most of my clients have mothers who are way down the spectrum beyond just narcissistic tendencies. I think there's a lot of people who have parents who maybe have some narcissistic tendencies. These people have narcissistic mothers. So when I hear stories, I can hear people will say things about their parents. And early on, we all kind of protect our parents in therapy. Or talking about them at all, because they're our parents and we love them. So I don't generally at the first appointment go, oh, I think your mother's a narcissist. In fact, I never say that. But as time goes on, there tends to be a theme with daughters of narcissistic mothers. And one of those things is absolutely self-worth and your ability to believe in what you're capable of in this world. Because a narcissistic mother often tries to, the only word I can really come up with is destroy her daughter. And there's a competition. Many of the people in my practice have spoken about their mothers dressing them in things that were inappropriate, things that were baggy, things that didn't look good on them, or making them cut their hair or wear their hair in a way that they didn't find attractive on them, or telling them that they didn't look good or that they weren't pretty or not smart or not as smart as somebody else. A big theme, though, is that it's about what mom wants. So if mom wants her daughter to be a dancer, she's going to be a dancer. Whether the daughter wants that or not does not matter. And that can cause some pretty significant damage over a childhood. And there's a lot of unkind things said about the daughter along the way, especially if she does not live up to what mom is expecting her to do. And it can be being a dancer. It can be being a straight A student. It can be a pageant queen, because everything that the daughter does is a reflection of this mother. And so she needs her daughter to, one, generally be really amazing at something or everything that she feels is important. Or two, she's going to make her feel like she's not good at anything. Make the daughter feel like she's not good at anything. Especially if she's not doing things that mom wants her to do. So what a lot of these women have come out of childhood with is the inability to even make their own decisions, because mom made all of them. And that really wasn't noticeable to her throughout her childhood, right? Because your mom is sort of the person guiding your life, or both your parents, when you're growing up. But when you get into adulthood and you realize, like, why is it so hard for me to make decisions? And you start unpacking all of this and realizing you were never given the opportunity to learn how to make your own decisions, because all the decisions had to be what was in mom's best interest. even if it wasn't mom actually saying that out loud, a daughter learns that it's in her best interests to make sure that mom's happy. So whatever that means, she's going to do that. So I see this play out in relationships, where daughters of narcissistic mothers often feel some relationship anxiety, feel like maybe they're not good enough in a relationship, or they do everything in the relationship that then leads to burnout. And they pretty much all want to raise their children differently than the way they were raised, but they sometimes don't understand why until they've really walked through a lot of this. So like I say, this tends to take a while. As I get to know somebody, we talk, I might have a moment where I think, oh, that seems a little like a trait from a narcissistic mother, but I generally won't bring up narcissism for quite a while. And sometimes after some time working together, someone will bring it up themselves and they'll go, so I just have been researching stuff, or, and I'm wondering, what do you know about narcissism? Every once in a while that happens. More commonly, somewhere along the lines, I will go, do you know anything about narcissism? And sometimes people will say they do. And very often at that point, someone will go, well, I've often wondered if my mom was. And then we start a conversation. There's a particular book that I recommend to people. The title is amazing because it's just, Will I Ever Be Good Enough? And I've often said that title. Why can't I think of, it's Carol McBride, I believe, is the author's name. I'm going to look that up so that I don't misquote that. I've recommended this book so many times, you would think that I would absolutely know. Carol McBride, Karyl. It's a book that's been around for a while, and who knows, maybe someday I'll get her to come here and talk about it. That would be amazing. But there's 3 parts to this book, and the first part is identifying if your mother is a narcissist, and there's a questionnaire. And so that's what I have people do, is I go over to your favorite bookstore, online bookstore, read the description of the book. If it calls to you, maybe you buy it, right? Or go to the library, get it at the library, read the first section, do the questionnaire. At that point, you'll know whether or not you're dealing with a narcissistic mother or not. And if you are, well, then keep reading. Read into section 2, which really goes into common traits of daughters of narcissistic mothers. And they are very similar. And, they start with that really core self-worth issue, which plays out in a lot of different ways, in people pleasing, obviously. And, perfectionism. And really this idea that I'm never going to be good enough for anybody else, or at work, or in my life in general. I'm never good enough. And then section 3 of the book is about healing through this. And that's what I do a lot of in my office, is working through this process of healing. And it is complex and lengthy. And what happens with most of my clients, again, as I've said again, this is a long process. And so there's a long time before even identifying the narcissism. And then there is the acceptance of the narcissism, which is a whole step in its own, to actually acknowledge it. And I have a lot of people who have said, I can see some of this in my mom. I don't know if she's a full narcissist. But yeah, I can see some of it. And then as time goes on, that turns into more of, okay,
I was trying to avoid this, but I do think she's a narcissist. I actually think she's a narcissist. And now I got to figure out what I have to do about that. And then it goes into, well, I can't fully remove her from my life. That will never happen, because that is one of the things in this book and also in my work that I don't recommend it. I don't go, this is what you must do. But it is one of those things that are really hard to talk about, and also potentially, at least mentally health, life-saving to do for some of these women. And it has never been a process of somebody going, oh my gosh, my mom's a narcissist, I'm going to remove her from my life. That is not how this works. There's so much so many attempts at trying to communicate with mom, trying to communicate how they're feeling, trying to communicate, these are the changes I need in our relationship. And they're often met with silence. They're met with gaslighting. They're met a lot with, your therapist is telling you things that aren't true. There's often a blame or a deflection, and it can go on for a long time before someone finally says, this is it. I can't do this anymore. I can't have her in my life. And people who have said for months, years, there's no way I can remove her from my life, often end up removing their mothers from their lives, in great part because they will not allow their mother to hurt their children the way they were hurt. That is usually the catalyst. Not for everyone. I have had people remove their mothers who didn't have children. And I also have people who still have a very guarded relationship with their mothers. But I'll also tell you that the clients who have had mothers, who have removed mothers from their lives, will often say, it was the most freeing thing I've ever done. Not easy. There is nothing easy about it. And the grief involved in all of this is lengthy. It starts from the beginning of understanding the narcissism, because it starts with that process of, oh my gosh, my whole childhood that I thought was one way, I actually don't know anything, because I never got to make my own decisions. And my mom did control everything I did. And you don't even understand it because it's just the way you grew up. And so the grief starts there, in starting to have to understand that your childhood wasn't what you thought your childhood was, and that there was a lot of manipulation in your childhood. And then it just continues from there through the process of, and I'm going to use the word, begging their mothers to hear them, to listen, to please just be my mom and hear me. And can we work through this? Can we talk about it? Can we, and there, most of them are not saying to their mothers, you're a narcissist. They're saying, can you please listen to me? Can we have a conversation? Can we change the way we interact? And so far, in a true narcissistic relationship, that's never worked out the way the person starting the conversation wants it to go, unfortunately. And so there's so much grief in that, because we love our parents. We are wired biologically to love our parents. Even if you don't like them all the time, we generally love our parents, even in the worst kind of situations. And so in this kind of situation, it's so insidious because they're just now understanding that the relationship was abusive. And that's hard to unpack. So when you get to that place, when you have to acknowledge, okay, my childhood wasn't what I thought my childhood was. And this relationship with my mother is unhealthy. And she won't listen to me. She won't talk to me. She won't engage with me on a level I need her to. What's my next step? And even if they choose to keep them in their lives, there is just little grief in there all the time because they are hurt over and over and over again. And back at the beginning, I mentioned that a lot of my people in my office have one sister, and several of them have lost that sister as well because she has chosen mom. And because this sister is setting boundaries and not letting mom behave the way she used to. And if she cuts her mom out of her life, the other sister has to make a decision. And it's very hard there too, because she may still want mom in her life. She was treated differently sometimes than the other sister. But she still wants her sister in her life. But this other sister is making these decisions to cut mom out. So what do I do? And that is so hard. And there's grief on both sisters' sides then. But for the one who's made the decision to cut mom out, to lose her sister too, it's devastating. So, and then this daughter becomes, the one who broke up the family, the one who changed everything, when really she's the one that's healing herself. And she has been begging to be heard and to be welcomed into her mom's arms and to be held and supported and to have a mother go, of course, let's do this. Let's work on this. I'm sorry. But that's not what a narcissist will do. A narcissist doubles down. And that is what I see over and over and over again. And it's painful. And even years after a mother being removed from somebody's life, there's so much grief. I think it will probably last forever. When that mother ultimately dies, the grief is incredibly complex. Because even though they've grieved her for years and years and years, as long as she's alive, even if they don't talk to her, there's that hope. And when she dies, the hope goes away too. The hope of ever having that relationship that they want to have with her. And so then the grief in that is incredibly complex. So I start this conversation because it has become a very big topic in my office. Before COVID, I had a support group for daughters of narcissistic mothers here locally where I work. And then that kind of fizzled out during COVID. We did meet virtually for a while, and then it just sort of fizzled out. And so for years, since I've been back in the office, many of these people have said, if you ever start another one, I will be back. Because one of the things I always said was that group, and it was small. There were probably, 6, 7, 8 women. I still say it was one of the greatest things I ever did was just to put them in a room together. And I really did nothing but provide this space. And yet I would sit with them and I would hardly have to say anything because they were just carrying the conversation. They found people who didn't look at them and say, but she's your mom. You can't treat your mom like this. They understood it. There would never be that comment. And there were so many, somebody would tell a story and somebody else would go, oh my gosh, yes. And it just was this place of unconditional support and understanding. And so for years, since we've been back in the office, I've been like, how do I recreate this, but also open it up to more people? And so I have started an online support group for daughters of narcissistic mothers. So if you happen to be listening to this and you're thinking, how do I find a support group for that? I have one. I'll drop the links into the show notes. I'm not going to spend any time selling it to you here necessarily, because I don't really want this podcast to be me selling you things. But I did want to share that it exists. So I'll drop the information in the show notes, and then you can look into it more. You can always reach out to me. My contact information is in the show notes, so you can always reach out to me if you want more information. But it is an online group. If you are here local in the Western Washington area, the Puget Sound area, my goal is that we will meet occasionally in person, but for sure we're going to meet at least once a month virtually, through Zoom, so people can get to know each other. And I think we're all kind of accustomed to Zoom these days. And I never thought that would really work as far as support goes, but it definitely does with the right community for sure. So, because I think the thing that is most powerful in healing for daughters of narcissistic mothers is community. It's people who understand this in a way no one else can understand. So I'm going to bring that community back because as long as I have worked in this field, I've always felt like, okay, I have a platform. What else can I do to assist people in their healing besides just offering one-on-one support? Because I do think community support is often really incredible. And, I talk a lot with women about how hard it is to make friends in adulthood. And this is another option, another way to meet people who maybe will become friends. And that I think is a pretty amazing thing too, that this virtual world has provided for all of us. So all that to say, I'm going to talk a lot about various topics that have a grief component that maybe we wouldn't think of as having a grief component. And this one just felt like it was the one that I needed to start with because it feels very front of my energy right now. And I think it's something that needs more attention. There are several books. You can go to your local bookstore or online bookstore and look them up. There are several. And you can do that if you're listening to this thinking, wait, is my mom a narcissist? Because I really haven't. This was a Reader's Digest version, even though it's been a half an hour. But it's a Reader's Digest version of what it's like to be the daughter of a narcissistic mother. So I'd love to hear your comments about it. I'd love to hear your experiences. You're welcome to reach out to me on social media. You're welcome to reach out to me personally via my email. And for no other reason than to just share your story. You don't have to be asking me for anything or buying anything. But you're also welcome to look into the support group. And if it can help you, that's what it's there for. So yeah, I think that's my, again, Reader's Digest version of the grief associated with being the daughter of a narcissistic mother. I might come around to this topic again, but my next podcast, I don't even know what the topic really truly will be because I kind of am winging it on all of these. It's just the way I wanted this podcast to be. So we'll see what my feeling is the next time I sit down to record, and we'll go from there. But we're going to keep talking about grief here. And Also, hopefully, be bringing on some guests again, because I really would like to have some people come in and share their stories, and have some more people come in and talk about some of the things I've talked about solo and add their voice to these topics. So we'll see how this goes. I look forward to whatever the next topic is. I hope you do too. And I wish you all the best available rest of your day. Take good care. Bye.